We have Dr. Katy Williams from Leopard Trust in South Africa joining us. Hi, Katy. We have Elian Adams and myself from the EarthRanger program. We have Dr. Koustubh Sharma from Snow Leopard Trust. And Dr. Enoka Kudavidanage is unfortunately not able to join us, but I'll be giving a presentation on her behalf. So we're the presenters and organizers today, and really delighted to be with you to talk about a topic of great importance for conservation, which is managing human-wildlife conflict and how we can use technology solutions to address that. And we're going to have a really interesting agenda today. So first of all, Dr. Koustubh has joined us and he's giving the opening remarks today, and he's going to talk about ethics and security of sharing data, which is a really important topic. And he's going to lead off with that presentation. Then Dr. Katy Williams is going to present about integrating EarthRanger and other technology into research, conservation, and education. And then we're going to have a presentation on behalf of Dr. Enoka and myself about using EarthRanger as a platform for monitoring leopards in Sri Lanka. And then we're going to talk about the mechanics of how we use technology and specifically the EarthRanger tools to analyze conflict patterns, to create geofences, to detect when animals are moving in the landscape, and to create alerts and notifications. So then we're going to have an overview of what we've discussed and question and answers. And during the session today, if you have any questions that you would like to have answered, would you please type them into the chat here and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Koustubh, who is going to give us the first presentation. Koustubh?
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. And hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to see so many known faces again in this call. And thanks, Tony, for inviting me to speak almost unannounced on this fascinating series that you guys are leading. The reason I keep showing this slide again and again is because of the fact that we are on a technological upswing. Technology is getting better, easier to access, and more powerful. But as that happens, it's also creating a bit of a divide in the society where access to certain technology is empowering a certain group of people at times at the cost of another set of people. And by the way, if you are actually crediting this quote, that with great power comes great responsibility to Stan Lee's Spider-Man, it's not quite the case. This is a fairly old quote, dates back to the 18th century, around the time of the French Revolution, that it was spoken. So you can imagine people have been thinking about the power dynamics and the responsibility that comes with it for a very long time. Anyway, the reason I am talking about it today is camera traps, and of course, a lot of other technology. As you all know, camera traps are sophisticated tools that have revolutionized wildlife research and monitoring. And other than just counting animals or detecting animals, they have become a great tool to provide incredible insights about on animal abundance, animal behavior, movement, species richness, and space use as well. So the point being that it's not surprising that the number of publications using camera traps has increased to 4 to 6-fold in the last 25, 30 years. Most camera traps that we deploy out there typically have dual sensors, and they do not discriminate between what they have been set up for and what they actually capture. Sometimes they make for a great intrigue for children, local people, and you do end up with some fun encounters such as this one. But on other instances, the stealth, coupled with outstanding capacity to capture hundreds of thousands of photos without running out of memory or battery, has inspired, if I may use the word, many researchers to use them for monitoring legal as well as illegal movement of people. Expectedly, human images in camera traps have led to legal actions, legislations, litigations, and some general and overarching advisories as well. While the images can be an evidence for investigation and prosecution, it can also be considered as a breach of people's privacy. Many countries nowadays have laws and legal frameworks about breach of privacy, freedom of movement, and personal autonomy, which many times, at least we aren't even aware of. On the other end of the legal framework is the fact that in many situations, the researchers might be bound by law or a permit clause to report illegal activities. We all know that several conservation programs across the world are guilty of being coercive and imposed top-down, leading to marginalization and even injustice in some cases. We know the issue of privacy ties up closely with that of the human rights, where the UN Declaration on Human Rights has reinforced in two of its articles, stating that all humans are born free and equal, and that nobody should be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. How does this relate to what we are doing, which is this camera trap? Fact remains that the extended risks of jeopardizing delicate relationships that we build with communities or conservation, they are put at risk by a technological solution if deployed and used inappropriately. It also puts to risk the relationship a researcher may have with governments or other enforcement agencies, because they may have their own set of expectations of working with them, sharing information. So we did find during our review that in many countries, it's even illegal to remove human images on these camera traps, which is more like an extension of the laws around the use of CCTV cameras that you might see in banks and hotels and streets and many other places. So the idea being that to tread the tightrope between ethics and legalities can be difficult, and it leaves gaping holes that can not only be used against unsuspecting local communities, but also researchers. And we all know about tens, if not hundreds, of legal battles many conservationists have been fighting with the law enforcement authorities to try and make things clear. So what we did a few years ago, we tried to list 7 basic concepts that we hope can provide a useful checklist to visit every time you're planning to camera trap in a new area. I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly because I don't have more than 10 minutes, almost at the edge of it. But the first one being permission. I think it's the simplest to understand, but it can get nuanced given uncertain land ownerships, which are sometimes likely because of disputes, forced demarcations, or even evictions. We all get surprises on camera traps, sometimes pleasant, sometimes even unpleasant. And while the use of cameras should be clearly identified, so the use is kept within the framework of its stated purpose, it can also be kept broad enough to allow for exploring secondary questions. Having said that, any use of human images should only be pursued after additional approvals. And that brings us to the next point of disclosure, where areas that are likely to be used by local communities, it is important to make them aware in advance about the upcoming camera trapping work. It is important to maintain transparency by distributing information, whether it's through leaflets or WhatsApp messages or community meetings or town hall meetings or whatever. But putting up signages as well not necessarily on top of the camera that this is where there is a camera, but this region has camera traps. This disclosure goes to the extent of sharing with local communities the start and end date of camera trapping as well. Now, there could be a professional hazard here where cameras can get stolen by unauthorized or unknown people, but it also goes the other direction as well. Building this risk into the proposal themselves often comes as something that's totally worth the effort. The legality part, we briefly discussed about it. It's important to review the laws and laws of land and legal obligations because they can vary considerably between regions. Review may help make an appropriate disclosure. And also it becomes important to keep the other end of the legality where any attempt to take action against potential illegal activities can itself be deemed illegal. So we have to be very careful about the legalities. I know it takes extra time, but it's really, really critical and important to address this. Breach of privacy can often lead to targeted harassment, injustice, discrimination, and also persecution. And typically, blurring features that can be used to recognize the photographed person can be used as a practice. There are AI-based tools now that automatically recognize and blur human images. If, however, one is obligated by law to share these images with the law enforcement authorities, it's critical that we take enough care to declare such obligations a priori to the people who might be using those areas. I think to have people to participate goes a long way. It not only builds trust, but it also can generate ideas that eventually become beneficial to both the researcher as well as the local authorities. And lastly, while it could be tempting to claim non-existent features in these cameras, which I've heard sometimes that, oh, this camera will take a picture up to 3 kilometers away if someone's doing any illegal activity. Oh, this camera has a GPS embedded in it, or it has a live transmission feature, even if it doesn't have one. Such practices are breeding grounds of deteriorating trust and potentially greater damage in the long run, both to the relationship as well as the equipment. And it's always a good practice to share images and credits with relevant authorities who may have given permission to do this work as well. Oops, can you guys still hear me? Sorry. Yeah. Voluntary initiatives to show images, data, or findings with the local communities they usually help build trust and are more likely to become partners. People are more likely to become partners given the enthusiasm of seeing something they may have never seen before, even within their own neighborhood. So quickly ending on that one, I just want to reiterate the golden rule, which we all know about, that this is one topic where there's a lot of exposure and experience out there in the world, but I think it's also something that we often tend to miss out. And I really want to thank all our partners who have supported developing this little guidance together, and also to the organizers of this workshop, and especially to you, Tony, for inviting me to speak today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Koustubh. That's really important food for thought. And I just wanted to confirm that this is actually a publication that has been published in one of the SCB journals. Is that correct?
I think it's Ecology and Evolutions. It's not an SCB journal.
Okay.
I can copy the link to this article on the chat window.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks, Koustubh. Great. Really, thank you for joining us today. I know that you're super busy. If you're able to stay on for a little bit, it'd be wonderful. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining us. If you have any questions for Koustubh about his presentation, please pop them in the chat. We're going to now move on to the second part of our session today. And I wanted to introduce Dr. Katy Williams from Cape Leopard Trust. So the Cape Leopard Trust is an environmental NGO based in the Western Cape, South Africa. And their mission is to protect leopards and leopard landscapes and to support coexistence between humans and wildlife through research, conservation, and education. And Dr. Katy has agreed to to join us today, and she's going to give a presentation about integrating EarthRanger and other technology into research, conservation, and education. Katy?
Hi, everyone. Let me just get my screen up, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you. Okay, I hope you can all see our leopards, and I can get started. I'm going to first of all just give you a little bit of context on where we are in the world. So this is the latest red list map, the local red list map for South Africa. And you can see these are the distribution points of where leopards are located in the country. The area you might be most familiar with is the Kruger Park area, which is the top north area, northeast up here. And that's really a stronghold for leopards, that north and eastern part of the country. But if you have a look at the map, there's a population of leopards down here near Cape Town. So these leopards in the Cape are essentially quite a long way away geographically from our more northern leopards, and they're dealing with a very difficult landscape. So these are leopards that are moving very much in human-dominated areas, in agricultural zones, not in fenced national parks that maybe is what you normally think of. So this is the population that the Cape Leopard Trust is trying to work with the communities so that we can continue to have leopards moving here in the Cape. And our organization essentially uses leopards as a flagship species for wider biodiversity conservation so that we can protect all the animals and all the fynbos habitat that's really special in this area. And in order to do this, we have three pillars to our work. We have research, which is really the foundation for understanding the conservation necessary, all of our conservation programs, and then a very dynamic environmental education program. And we've really found that EarthRanger has a home and a place across all of these so that we can make changes in the landscape to ensure that we have an area where leopards can thrive alongside humans. Our relationship with EarthRanger began a few years ago. I was fortunate to attend one of their international conferences in 2023. And at the time, I was looking essentially for a platform that we could use to centralize and organize all of our data. We were looking for a way for our field team to gather data easily and efficiently as they were out and about doing different projects. We wanted a safe and secure area for our data that we could access, and we wanted to be able to pull out the data so we could efficiently analyze it. And finally, we were looking to reduce our environmental footprint. At the time, we were carrying all sorts of bits of paper, and that just wasn't working. So EarthRanger ended up being a good transition for us. And I'm looking forward to kind of telling you how we've integrated it across various different ways, and maybe ways that people haven't have thought of yet. But we're going to start kind of leading off from the previous talk with some of our research elements. So in terms of our research portfolio, we do a lot of different types of research. We do scat analysis for diet for leopards. We do modeling for habitat suitability and corridors across the whole of the province. We do citizen science data collection and analysis, and a lot of interviews as well to understand people's perceptions of leopards and challenges. But one of our sort of most demanding parts of our research portfolio is managing our camera trap surveys. So the leopards here in the Cape use massive areas. They have huge home ranges. Our males are on average using about 600 square kilometers. So we need to have big camera trap surveys to understand what the density of the leopards is and what the trends are for the density estimates as well. So we're generally putting out about 200 cameras for a survey, and they're staying out for about half the year. And what we've found is that EarthRanger has been a really useful tool for us in terms of keeping track of where the camera traps are, all the equipment information, and when the cameras are working and if they have any errors as well. So we have event categories that we use for camera trap deployment, servicing. So when we go out and we change the batteries, we gather the data. We've got fields that we can gather information there. And then all of our takedown information as well. So we've been able to really produce a form that gathers all sorts of information about all the different equipment, when it's functioning, when we have challenges, and all of this information is integral as an input file for our density analysis. We're also very much enjoying the fact that we can map where the cameras are and the process of putting them all out and gather our photographs on evidence, like this scat that we found while we're putting our cameras out as well. And for myself as a director, I'm also able to watch the field team from afar. So I'm able to kind of see their progress as they move, make sure everybody's on course from my computer, which has been a real benefit for me, just looking after staff welfare and the process on the ground. Another part of our camera trapping work that we've been able to kind of integrate into EarthRanger is the fact that we've been able to modify our mapping so that we can add layers to help us understand our landscape better. So when we set up our camera traps, we use a grid system to make sure we've got our spacing correct. And we also want to add information onto our mapping about the tracks that our field team are using, which are the lines you can see on the map. The gray lines on there are different tracks we've used. And then we also want to have pins for pieces of information in terms of camera trap sites and different elements of our mapping landscape. So EarthRanger lets us really modify the map for our needs, and we're able to zoom in on specific camera trap points as well and really get the information we need. So integrating EarthRanger has been really, really helpful for just better, efficient management of our camera trapping data. And having this has gone hand in hand with the other part of understanding leopard density, which is working through all the camera trap photos. And I'm sure those of you who have been through this process know the challenges, but with our surveys, we're dealing with about 200,000 images per survey. And we need to be extremely efficient and use whatever technology we can to help us work out which species we have and which leopards we have as accurately and as efficiently as possible. So we're very grateful we live in a time now with a lot of developing AI to help us with this. So we're able to use AI programs to help us with species ID, so we can work out all the different species that come up on our cameras and double check everything. And then using software as well. So we use Argus Wild AI for helping us ID all the different leopards and to confirm which one's which, so that we can have those input files of essentially who's who in the zoo, where we see all the leopards, and then bring that together with the knowledge we got from the EarthRanger platform about which cameras were functioning when, and then we can use that to get our leopard density estimates. And just to give you a little bit of a taste of kind of how many leopards do we have in our landscape and what are we dealing with down here, you can see from the bottom, this is some of our published results recently of different density estimates. But within our landscape, our leopards are occurring at a much, much lower density than those that you maybe would think of in South Africa. So in places like Kruger National Park, they will have about 10 leopards per 100 square kilometers in some of those areas. And down in the Cape, we're dealing with between 0.64 leopards per 100 square kilometers and about 1.5, that sort of number. So we have a much, much lower density of leopards down here in the Cape. And we really need to keep track of them and understand their challenges so that we can mitigate them through our conservation programs and ensure that we reduce the threats. So our conservation programs are very diverse because the leopards down here are facing all sorts of challenges, from roads, from snaring, from farmers, a lot of different issues. Also land change is a huge issue down here as well. As the population is growing in the Western Cape, the land available for leopards is shrinking, and the movement throughout areas and connectivity is a major challenge. And our kind of relationships with farmers need to be very clear, and we need to be very supportive for them. We need to help farmers to find ways to manage their livestock so that they can thrive, but leopards can also persist in this landscape as well. So we work with farmers to try and help them prevent conflict so that they can mitigate that problem and essentially take livestock off of the leopard's menu. When farmers call us, so they'll often phone us if they've lost sheep or goats, and they want support, they want help. And it's really important at that time to gather effective data and to give them appropriate advice for their landscape and for their farming situation. So we use EarthRanger again to help us manage the data and to sort of create a portfolio of what's happening on each farmer's land. So when we get a phone call with a farmer who's lost some livestock, we have an event on EarthRanger where we can gather information about the number of animals lost, all the information about when it happened and where, the mitigation methods the farmer maybe already has in place, all the background information that we need to move forward with that farmer. If the loss has happened fairly recently, we will send someone out and we'll do a carcass inspection. And again, we have an event in EarthRanger where we can gather information through that, take photos of the carcasses, of the bite marks, and we can gather the information we need to confirm which predator was definitely responsible. And often when we go out, we may set up cameras. So we again use our camera events to gather information just on where our equipment is as well. If it's going to different farmers' lands, we need to keep track of that. And we also use EarthRanger to gather information on tracks and signs as well as we move through farmers' properties. If we spot leopard spoor, we want to know where that is, where these animals are moving. This is just a quick sort of picture of what it looks like, but we are able to gather all sorts of info, for example, on the estimated cost of the loss, the different sort of demographics of the animals that were lost, the females, males, juveniles, etc. And then on our map, we're able to really visualize where the conflict calls are, whether we're having hotspots in certain areas, and really make a visual picture for us to understand our landscape and understand which areas in the province need more support, which farmers groups need better help. And we're actually using one of the features at the moment where we can import historical data into EarthRanger to help us understand this better. So there's a lot of records going back to the early 2000s even that we've been able to curate about losses of livestock, and we're now importing all of that into EarthRanger. So we have a central place for about 20 years of data on livestock losses. And we're going to be using that central database that we're building in EarthRanger to do further analysis on different trends in terms of seasonal losses and areas when we're having losses and which livestock types are most vulnerable. So really transitioning to that research element to help us do better conservation through our EarthRanger platform. With our farmer support program, we also want to help them to find tools to help prevent losses as well. Speaking to many of our commercial farmers here in the Western Cape, they told us that they need to move their livestock around their farms. They can't just have a corral in one location, it has to move around. But they need a corral that they can pack on the back of a trailer or a pickup truck, something that's going to keep leopards out, jackals out, caracals out, something that they can move in mountainous areas. So we started a project a few years ago to try and design a mobile predator-proof corral that could be expandable for different size herds and could be utilized by farmers and built themselves essentially. And the idea is that once we've created a design and we've trialed it properly, we're going to be releasing a blueprint, freely accessible blueprint for anyone in the world to see and download. This is happening in September, by the way. And then anyone can go build their own Moby Corral, essentially, and they can make it better and they can make it something that could work in their landscape. So for the past year now, we have had our prototype Moby Corrals out and about. You can see a little glimpse of them here. But essentially they pack down, fold down, and then fit in the back of the trailer. The farmer can drive it around his farm and then he can rebuild it again in an hour somewhere else. So it's going very well. And we've really embedded EarthRanger from the start in the monitoring and evaluation for the year-long trial of this. So whenever these Moby Corrals get deployed on the test farms, we have an EarthRanger event that we can gather all the info on where it is. We have a usage report so that our test farmers can basically evaluate during that trial month where they had it in that location. Did they have any challenges? Did they have any issues with the design? All of that is recorded by our test farmers. When we collect our Moby corrals, we'll record that in EarthRanger. If any of our test farmers have any conflict, if they lose any sheep during the trial, then they can report that on EarthRanger to us. And we have cameras around our Moby corrals as well to monitor any predator activity. And again, we're just using EarthRanger to track where our cameras are. And it's been really nice because our test farmers are across South Africa, and they have access to EarthRanger through a special account with us, and they can share data directly with us on their Moby Corral trial because of the relationship and the permissions we've given them. They don't get access to all of our facilities in terms of EarthRanger, but just this one to do with their Moby corrals they have access to, and it comes directly to us. So it really collates the information right away. And this is what some of the reports look like. So when we have our Moby corrals up, we can take a nice picture of it. We get it on our maps. And then our farmer can gather information about how far he moved it, how many people it took him to put it up this time. All that info gets popped into EarthRanger, and we're able to track all the stats on how the trial is going. So it's been a really exciting project. And like I said, please keep an eye on us and download the blueprint if you're interested in a few months and see if you want to make your own Moby corral. Moving on, though, one of the other threats to leopards here in the Western Cape is illegal snaring. So the picture there on the right, these are snares that get set up in our landscape. It's used mainly for bushmeat hunting. The animals will walk on the trail, and then the wire snare will get wrapped around the animal's necks or abdomen or foot. And it's a very slow, painful death for the target animals, which are normally antelopes, porcupines, things like that, which are the leopard's prey, or for the leopards who get caught as bycatch as well, unfortunately. So this is something that we are really trying to work with farmers to address. We do a lot of snare patrol training with them. And we go out and we do patrols with farmers on their properties, teaching them how to gather data, where to look for snares, how to remove them safely, and all these things. So we use EarthRanger as a key part of our snare data collection. So when we do snare patrols, we use the patrolling part of EarthRanger to gather information on all the tracks that we take. So we'll get a list of all the different snare patrols. We're able to look at how far we walked and where we walked and really map out where the patrols were done. And then if we find any snares on our patrols, we have an event category where we gather all the information on how many snares were found, what they were affixed to, how they were made, if there was an animal caught. All of this sort of information gets gathered as well. And we've really been able to use this to create, again, a centralized database on where problems for leopards are, and use this to inform where conservation efforts need to be directed, and how do we move forward with the farmers or the landowners in this area. I think I mentioned a little bit before, but the permissions element of EarthRanger has been really valuable to us. So, you know, we have our team who are doing all sorts of things, but then we have our test farmers on the Moby corrals. We have guests who go and do snare patrols for us. We want to gather data from various parties. So you can see in the box at the bottom, these are just a few of our kind of different permission levels, but not everybody can gather all data. We're able to give certain permission to certain groups that work with us who we trust, and they can see their data, but they can't see everything else. And we've been really impressed with the way we can use this to include communities or partners in our EarthRanger data collection process and make them part of conservation, which has been really positive. And then exporting data has been such a valuable part of our EarthRanger journey. So, you know, once we've gathered all this info, we're able to export a really clean CSV with all of the info or all of our track data, and everything's able to come out ready for analysis and sharing and communication, and using that in a valuable way. So I also said I was going to talk about how we use technology in education as well. And I think this is a really nice ending to what I want to share is that, our program, as well as sort of directly trying to mitigate conflict with people living in leopard landscapes, is also trying to make sure that our future ambassadors and our future leaders within our landscape are thinking about the importance of leopards and importance of our wildlife. So we work very intensely with all sorts of young people. We do all sorts of programs with them. We have children's books that are really well received. And we do an eco club program where we work with older primary children and we do 6 lessons with them. And one of the lessons that we do with these children is our nature and technology lesson. And this is the one that I think is really exciting. So we try and show them all the different technology that is used in conservation. For example, we teach them about how drones can be used in conservation. And we even have a practical activity where we have the kids stand in the school field and they do their own game count with a drone of themselves, essentially, but learning how drones can be used for a game count. So getting them hands-on with technology and seeing how that's part of conservation. We have a VR experience that also comes as part of this program, where the kids can basically go to a leopard area. They can go up to the Cedarburg, which is one of our really wild places, and they can see what that landscape's like. They get to see the rock art with the leopards painted on the walls by the Bushmen many, many years ago. And that's part of the fact that we want kids to get excited about conservation. We want them to learn about it in a way that's going to get them to care. And the cameras also come to the classroom as well. So we teach them about camera trapping. They get to set up their own cameras and learn about this hands-on. And we can talk to them during this part of the lesson about how we use the EarthRanger app for our camera trapping work and really show them the value of technology and the fact that conservation careers could be their pathway forward if they're passionate about technology. So working with children and the next generation, I think, is just as important as working with your farmers if you want to think about reducing conflict in the long run. So that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you so much for all of you joining me, and please do keep in touch with Cape Leopard Trust if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. That was a wonderful presentation. Really exciting how you've gotten up and running in just a short period of time, and you've got EarthRanger serving as a platform for creating information and then using that information to seed your programs. How did you get up and running so quickly, and how many people have been involved in the development of EarthRanger at the site?
Yeah, so we felt very well supported by EarthRanger, and I think that was a key part of it. Is that when we first expressed interest, we had people pretty much right away from EarthRanger giving us video calls and holding our hand through the first few months while we figured it out, and supporting us, and that support's really helped us to find our feet. I've also been very fortunate that within my team, we've got some very passionate younger conservationists working with me, and they're very tech savvy. So they also just very quickly could pick up the concepts and run with it, essentially. So yeah, a combination of good support and good team members from my side.
Fantastic, Katie. We have a question here in the chat from Bozo, who has asked us, has fencing in private game reserves also affected leopards' movement? And if so, could EarthRanger be used to track the severed corridors and identify places where leopards have tried to cross them?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So within the South African landscape, there is a lot of game fencing that is used across many, many private properties. One of the things about leopards, though, is that in many cases, they are not stopped by a fence. They can climb all sorts of things, even your sort of predator-proof fences. A leopard can often get over or under, depending on the fence. So they can often get in and out of these big reserves. So it's not been a major issue on leopard movement. So that's why even outside of the Western Cape where we work, even in the areas where there are more game fences, leopards do move between these areas. So it doesn't have a huge issue. Um, but I think that you're absolutely right that EarthRanger is a really important tool that is being used to track leopard movement. And I know some organizations, for example, that are using collars on animals like leopards, and they're able to see, for example, like you asking about movement along corridors, and that sort of element is really possible due to the EarthRanger integration with the collaring work and also the camera trap stuff as well. So, we're also able to bring that in to see where we see leopards, and we can ID them with the spot patterns and see if it's the same individual in different landscapes. So yes, I think that is definitely a really important part of what we need to learn about leopard distribution, especially because these young males need to disperse long distances, and we really need to make sure that they can get there safely. So we need ways to track that and understand that.
Thanks, Katie. Wondering if the Moby Corral have had instances of leopards trying to get in, and if you've had registered the outcomes, how is it going as leopard proof?
Yeah, good question. So we've got camera traps all around our trial corrals, and we have had leopards coming up to them at the night and basically walking around, looking at the livestock inside, and sort of doing their little stalking up to it, and giving up. So realizing they're not able to get in and then walking away. So it's been really wonderful to see that evidence on the camera traps that they are effective. We haven't had any losses of livestock that were in our corrals. So we are pretty positive on their predator-proof ability if used correctly. So that's a positive outcome from our testing.
Fantastic, Katie. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So we're going to move to the next presentation, and I'm going to share my screen here. Today, I'm going to speak on behalf of Dr. Enoka Kudavidanage, who isn't able to join us today, but she's asked if I could present her presentation on leopards in Sri Lanka. So I'm going to talk to you today about a project that I've actually just visited recently in Sri Lanka. And this is a project undertaken by Dr. Enoka Kudavidanage, who has an NGO called TERN. And the objectives of the project is to study the leopard populations in human-dominated landscapes, mostly outside of protected areas, and to facilitate human-leopard coexistence and conservation. And the Sri Lankan leopard is the only big cat species in the country, and it's endemic subspecies of leopard. It's an apex predator, and there's an estimated population of less than 1,000. So it's actually quite threatened. And it's distributed over the entire area of the island. It's both ecologically and economically important. And this project site that I'm going to talk about today is in the central south of the country. It's an area of forest that is essentially part of a corridor linking two national parks. And this area is like a private concession that's been leased to the NGO. And in that area, there are a range of issues facing wildlife and people, including the loss of habitat and poaching, and also many social issues related to poverty and resource extraction. So there's a lot of conflict between animals and humans in this landscape. And there are, for example, the animals that are part of the conflict are not just the leopards, but also elephants, Asian elephants. In Sri Lanka, there are more than 6,000 elephants in the island. It's one of the highest densities of Asian elephants anywhere in Asia. And the leopard density in parts of this landscape go up to 40 animals per 100 square kilometers. So lots of animals that are moving around in the landscape and lots of interactions with people, some of which are negative. So a little while ago, Dr. Enoka and her team decided to develop a digital platform to help to collect information on the leopards and to use that information to make changes to how the forest is managed. And they started to do this by setting up camera traps. And they've gotten in collaboration with a group called the Wildlife Protection Solutions. So Wildlife Protection Solutions has helped to provide some camera traps, which are connected camera traps. They're 4G enabled camera traps. And they have set these camera traps up at the site. The camera traps send images to EarthRanger through the WPS Watch platform that allows you to filter the data and to identify what animals are on the images and have those images sent to EarthRanger. So this is Dr. Enoka and Ravi and her team in the forest there, and they've been setting up camera traps for several years now. They've got different types of camera traps, and they've got the conventional camera traps in addition to the 4G enabled camera traps and CCTV cameras. And it's quite an elaborate setup that they've got at this site. So here's what the data looks like in EarthRanger. The data comes in as events. So when images are detected by the camera traps, they get sent to EarthRanger, and the events come in as detections, and certain types of events are coded so that they appear as alerts in a different color. So, for example, elephants or leopards, those are species that are a species of concern. So when an image of one of those species is captured or detected, then it goes to the platform and it appears as an alert, so that it brings the user to the attention of what's happening there. So this is what the platform looks like in WPS Watch. WPS Watch, we talked about this in week 3. This is a platform for managing data from camera traps. And so this is what the platform looks like. Data comes in from cameras, which are part of the inventory. There's 3 camera traps that have been set up as part of the cameras that are feeding data into this platform and into EarthRanger. And over the last 3 months, more than 2,500 images were captured. And you can imagine the amount of data that you would have to filter and go through if you were doing this manually. Well, they don't have to do that anymore because they can filter the data using WPS Watch, and they can extract just the information that they need. So the results of camera trapping, 11 mammal species detected, and also human activities are detected, and that includes possible poaching activities. So what has happened is that Dr. Enoka has set up a way of classifying the data, and through the classification process, images of leopards are identified as such and then sent to the platform and highlighted. And so we see when images come in of an animal, the platform identifies the species and then tells EarthRanger that there's an elephant, and then sends the image, and that appears as an event. You get information from the WPS Watch platform about the status of the cameras, including information on the battery and whether the camera is functioning. And we can see events coded according to their level of priority. So this is all configurable through WPS Watch, and basically the data feeds from the platform into EarthRanger. And here's some data showing the human use of the landscape, and we're seeing evidence of poachers here in these photographs. This is very useful for managers to have this data because in real time you can essentially get the photographs that show images of people and what they're doing, and then that data can be shared with authorities as needed. So the next steps for developing this platform are that they're going to develop a larger network of camera traps, and they're going to start to integrate the information feeds to the Department of Wildlife Conservation and the Forest Department. And that's really important that the authorities have information on both the wildlife and the human use of these forests. And these wildlife corridors are especially important, and they're also sensitive to human impacts and to forest loss. So another thing that's going to be developed in the next phase of the project is to link Global Forest Watch fire and deforestation alerts. So those appear as alerts in the EarthRanger platform. Yes, so this is a really interesting new project that has started in Sri Lanka, and EarthRanger is really happy to support this work. And just over the last couple of weeks, Enoka has been looking at the data using Ecoscope. And last week you learned about Ecoscope, and using the data that are coming in from the camera traps, Enoka has started to analyze what is happening with her camera traps, and she's collecting a lot of basic information on the camera traps themselves, but also on the data that is coming from those camera traps. And this is all being analyzed and visualized in Ecoscope. Yes, so that's the end of the presentation there. So if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat here. And Elian Adams, my colleague who is based in Bangkok, he's actually here on the call. And if you have any questions while I'm speaking, Elian will be able to answer those questions. So I'm going to go to the next section of our presentation here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we identify places that could be sensitive to human-wildlife conflict. So if we have data on animals that might be moving in the landscape, how can we use that information to zoom in on those sensitive areas? So last week, you learned about Ecoscope, and I'm going to show you a way in which we can actually analyze data and see how you can identify places that might be sensitive to HWC. So if you see my screen there, Elaine, can you see the screen there?
Yeah, looks.
Yeah. So what I've done here is I'm showing my Ecoscope dashboard, and last week we learned how this works. That you can open this. This is a free tool that takes the data from EarthRanger and then allows you to create what we call workflows. So workflows can be subject tracking workflows. So subjects can be things that you're following. They could be leopards, they could be ranger teams. So what I've done here is I've created a subject tracking workflow, and this is all about the leopard hotspots. So what I've done here is to create a visualization about the places where leopards are moving, and the data that I'm using is part of this demonstration database that you were looking at last week. And what I've done is I've created an example of how this works here. So imagine you've got data from collars of leopards that you're tracking. So as an example, if we look at the EarthRanger platform, this is our demonstration database. And if you remember from last week, you would have looked at and seen that you can have animals that are collared, and these animals can be moving around in the landscape, and you can be following them in real time. So taking the data from EarthRanger, how can we then analyze where conflicts might occur? So just switching back to my workflows, I've created this workflow, and let me show you what it is. So I've created a workflow which I'm calling Snow Leopard Hotspots, and it's taking this demo database, and I'm looking at the data from 2005 all the way through to the current time, and I'm looking at the subjects called snow leopards. So snow leopards, there's about 11 different individual snow leopards. So it's going to take the data from the collars, and then it's going to create a visualization so I can see what's happening through time. I'm grouping the data by time, by month, and I'm running what we call a workflow. I've submitted the workflow, and then what I can do is have a look at that workflow, and there we go. So I've created a very quick look at what's happened during the months of January through December. And we're looking at the January data, we see that there are some hotspots of leopard activity here and here and here and here. Now let's look a little bit further into this and looking at the home range map. So Ecoscope can produce these home range maps based upon the tracking data. It's really pretty cool. So what we've got is we've got a home range there, we've got a home range here, and one here and one here. So based upon this information, we'd be saying, okay, these are the places that may be subject to encounters with herders or encounters with people moving in the landscape, or encounters with communities or settlements that might be in the area. And looking at the tracking data, we've got some information on the day and night movement of these leopards. And we can see that actually these leopards are moving a lot during the daytime. So this male animal, most of its movements are during the day. This male animal also moving around during the daytime a lot, and this one too. So we get some basic information on what these leopards are doing, and these are the different collars. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 collared animals feeding data into EarthRanger, and we're able to analyze what's happening. And we can look at how things change from time to time. So January is the winter time in Mongolia. And if we go to the springtime in April, we see, okay, the leopards are still in those areas moving around, and they're still maintaining their home ranges in roughly the same kind of area. So we're getting some really useful information that can help us to target where conflict events could potentially happen. So let's go down to the end of the summer in September. So now we're looking at actually just one area where there's one male animal moving around, and there's his home range. And we got some very, very detailed information on this one animal. So using Ecoscope and taking the tracking data from these subjects, and the subjects are the snow leopards, we can actually get some preliminary information on where animals are moving and where there could be a risk of human-wildlife conflicts occurring. So that's just kind of a quick summary of how we can use Ecoscope to analyze EarthRanger data. And some of you may be interested in exploring this further. If you're interested in Ecoscope, please drop your name in the chat, and we'll send you some information. And those of you who didn't get to set up your Ecoscope account last week, if you'd like to have a free account, we can set this up for you very, very quickly. So it's a free tool. Ecoscope is a free tool, just like EarthRanger. It's part of the EarthRanger platform, and you can use it for free to analyze data and to get an idea of what's happening with your tracking data. So like I said, there are different types of workflows. We mentioned subjects, but there are also events workflows. So events are things that are observed. Patrols are obviously activities where people are out there monitoring threats. So that's another type of workflow. And there are also other types of workflows that you can use. And this is a platform that is evolving and developing all the time. And so in the future, there'll be other types of workflows that you can use with Ecoscope. Okay, so that's Ecoscope. And now I'm going to move on to talking a little bit about geofences. So we mentioned about Moby corrals. We mentioned about what happens if you want to detect things, movements of animals. So where are your animals moving? and what are they doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can use Ecoscope tools, EarthRanger tools, to understand what's happening and to create alerts. So I'm going to talk to you about analyzers. So what we can do in EarthRanger is we can create a way to detect when animals are moving. And I'm going to talk to you about these things called geofences. So geofence analyzers are virtual boundaries that trigger an alert and creates an event in EarthRanger when a subject or something that you're tracking moves across a boundary. So for example, if you're interested in seeing if a snow leopard or a leopard moves to your Moby Corral or close to your Moby Corral, you can set up a geofence around the Moby Corral, and then you can get an alert that warns you that something has happened. So how does this work? So in the context of monitoring human-wildlife conflict, we want to know in real time when an animal is approaching a sensitive area. So for example, an animal might be moving into a community, moving out of the forest, moving towards a settlement. And so a geofence analyzer appears as a boundary on the EarthRanger web map. So when the animal that you're tracking, maybe it's a snow leopard, maybe it's a leopard, maybe it's an elephant, when it moves across at that boundary, then it will trigger an alert to be sent to EarthRanger. And this is what it looks like. This is just an example of what happens. This is actually just taken from our demo database. So when an animal moves across the boundary, you will get this event appearing in EarthRanger in your web platform that says, okay, here's what happened. This animal that you've given a name to has moved across the boundary, and it's now in this particular region. So we know that something has happened. So there are different types of analyzers that we can see in EarthRanger. So for example, camera traps, we mentioned the case of using camera traps in South Africa and also in Sri Lanka. So you can set up camera traps so that when animals are detected or when people are detected, that sends an alert to the platform. You can also set up audio alerts. So if you're using a Magpie device or a Rainforest Connection device set up in the site, it detects something that you're trying to detect, such as the chainsaw noise or an engine noise. It'll detect that and will send an alert to EarthRanger. Cluster events. So for example, if you're interested in monitoring your animals and understanding when animals might be clustering, when they're moving to a place that might be a den or a kill or a feeding site, you can create a way to identify what we call clusters. So clusters are places where animals keep on coming back to repeatedly. So clusters are a type of event that we can identify, and that can also be shared with EarthRanger. Subject proximity. So if you have two animals that are collared, so for example, maybe a large cat that you've got a collar on, maybe a livestock that you've got a collar on, you can know when those animals have gotten into proximity, when they're close together. The two collars approaching each other will then tell you, okay, this animal is within 50 meters of this cow or this livestock. So you can create what we call subject proximity analyzers. So these are the types of things that you can use in EarthRanger. Immobility analyzers. Maybe you're interested in knowing if your animal has stopped moving. So maybe a collar that has stopped moving could indicate that the animal has rested, or maybe it's stuck in a trap, or maybe it's dead. So there is a way to determine that the animal has stopped and has not moved beyond a particular distance, and that's called an immobility analyzer. So this can also be configured in EarthRanger. So for example, in this case here, this animal has stopped for some time. Maybe it's an hour, or maybe it's 2 hours or something. You set the time limit, and then once that immobility event has been detected, it creates an event that's sent to EarthRanger, and we can see it in the platform there. So when things get close to each other, so for example, maybe you've got your Moby corral and you've got a leopard or a lion, and you want to know when an animal gets close to the Moby corral, you can create a distance feature that allows you to then know when that animal is within 50 meters of the Moby corral, and then you can send out a response team to go and investigate. Subject proximities, I did that before, and here's what we call an observation attribute analyzer. So this is a more complicated example where you're monitoring values sent from connected devices. You define a particular condition. So if the battery goes below 20%, when that condition is met, EarthRanger creates an event, and then your team can go out and respond. So these are called analyzers, and analyzers can be set up by yourself. They can also be set up by our support engineer. So if you're interested in trying this out with your EarthRanger deployment, we can help you to get set up. So you can create multiple geofences around an area. So for example, you've got a Moby corral. You want to know if an animal gets within 20 meters of the Moby corral. That's a critical geofence. If it gets within 100 meters or 200 meters or a kilometer, that can be a warning. So you can create multiple polygons, multiple boundaries around a sensitive location that allows you to understand what's going on at the site. And the mechanics of it are essentially you go into the admin platform and you can set up the geofence analyzers in this screen here, and you can configure the analyzer details with the name and the subject group. So for example, snow leopards maybe, and then your spatial features. You can set up, a single feature, or you can set up multiple features, and you can configure the analyzer details as you need to. So then once the geofence has been breached by the animal, for example, you've got this animal and it moves across that red boundary there, it will trigger an alert to be sent to EarthRanger that tells you a critical geofence has been broken. Yeah, so this is the mechanics of what it looks like. And this is a really cool feature that allows you to, in real time, use the data that's coming in from your collars or from your camera traps to detect something that you need to respond to quickly and to avoid human-wildlife conflict. So if you're interested in learning more about this, we've got some information that you can go to, and we'll share some links in the chat here. So this is all part of the EarthRanger documentation. Cool. So looking at the time, we've got another 15 minutes left. I'm just going to quickly talk about alerts and notifications. So what happens if your animal moves across a geofence? You want to get alerted and notified. So alerts are user-configured notifications that automatically trigger when a condition is met. So for example, if an animal moves close to your Moby corral, you will get an alert sent to the platform, and you can also get that alert sent to other devices. So for example, you can get a message to your WhatsApp or a message to your email. So when the geofence has been breached, for example, then you get an event in the platform, and then you get something sent to you. So you actually have it on your phone, and then you can actually take action. And this is all configured in the platform, in the web platform, in the alerts module there. It's very easy to do. You can actually quickly set this up yourself. So, for example, as an example here, if you want to set up a notification method, you just tell it what you want to be notified, how you want to be notified. So, for example, WhatsApp is our recommended way of getting notified. So you just put in the WhatsApp number, and you can put in multiple WhatsApp numbers. So, for example, if you want to get the farmer notified, or if you want to get the project manager notified as well, then you can put the multiple WhatsApp numbers in the notification method so that they all get alerted. And this then allows you to be able to do your own work and not have to worry about going back to the site. These alerts will come in automatically, and then you'll be able to then take action. So this is all work that is configurable within the EarthRanger platform. It's very easy to learn how to do this, and you can actually learn some of this through our online training. I believe it's the admin training that we offer, where you'll learn about configuring alerts. Is that correct, Elian? It's the admin training.
Yep, it's the admin training.
Yeah, so this is something that you can learn how to do through our online training platform. And if you're interested in getting trained and joining the training program, we'll put a link into the chat here, and you can join the monthly trainings. I think every month there's 2 trainings, and you can join a training that works for you in terms of the time that you have available. So here's an example of an alert that's been sent to a mobile device. This is what they look like. So in this case, there's a notification that Fatu, this animal, has crossed the outer boundary, and you get the time and the date and the location, and that information is all sent to your WhatsApp and to your email. Yeah, so that's what it looks like, and so it's a really great tool to know immediately what has happened, and you don't have to be watching the platform. You don't have to be logged in and looking at EarthRanger. You can get this information directly to your phone and to your email. Great. So that's very quickly alerts and how they're configured. And like I said, if you're interested in setting this up, this is something that we can do for you. And there's quite a lot of documentation available from the website. So yeah, that is what I have for you. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to hand over to you to ask questions in the last 10 minutes that we have together. Do you have any questions about what we've talked about today? We've covered quite a lot of really useful information, from Dr. Katy Williams' presentation about Cape leopards to the presentation about Sri Lankan leopards. We've talked about how we can use Ecoscope to identify hotspots where there's potential issues with human-wildlife conflict. We've talked about geofences and how they work. We've talked about analyzers, and we've talked about alerts and configuring them. So I'm going to hand over to you now, and please, if you have a question, then raise your hand and we'll address those questions one by one. Thanks, everyone. So we've got a question there. Has any researcher in Nepal used EarthRanger to study snow leopards to date? I don't believe that we have anybody using EarthRanger in Nepal yet for snow leopards. We have other users who are working on pangolins. So Greenhood Nepal is working on pangolins, and the Red Panda Network is using EarthRanger to monitor threats to red pandas. And we also have, we've started a new project with Himalayan Wolf Project. They're using EarthRanger. They're going to start to use EarthRanger to monitor Himalayan wolves and other carnivores, but not yet snow leopards. Does the geofence still alert if the predator hasn't been previously identified on one of the camera traps? Yes, so if the animal, it depends on how you've configured your alert. So if you're interested in detecting any leopard, any predator, then you will get an alert that a predator has been detected by the camera traps. if you're specifically interested in leopards, but not dhole, not leopard cats, then you would have to configure the alerts so that WPS Watch is detecting just those leopards. So yeah, so the geofence alert works depending upon what you're interested in detecting. Great. So how many of you are currently using EarthRanger? Could you put your hands up or thumbs up? Stanley's using it. Katie's using it in Africa. Okay, great. So if you're not yet using EarthRanger and you're interested in setting up an account or even just trying it out, we'd be happy to set up an account for you or give you access to what we call the playground, where you can practice and you can learn how the platform works, and you can download the app and you can play with it and see if there's something that you'd like to actually set up for your conservation project. If you're interested in doing that, please type in your email into the chat here and I'll send you an invitation. Yeah, so for those who want to start, just type in your email here. And what we can do is we'll send you some information and we'll ask you to fill in a form that tells us about the site that you're working at and what you're trying to achieve and how you'd like to use EarthRanger, and then we can set up an account for you. We're happy to do that for anybody. And EarthRanger is completely free of charge. We don't charge for access to the platform or the mobile app. We don't charge for support for getting you started. And as Katie mentioned, we're happy to meet with you and to talk you through all the different solutions that might be relevant to your particular use case. And Samanu, thank you for your question about ethical considerations of geofencing collars for keeping livestock safe. Yeah, that's a really important consideration. And Dr. Koustubh has shared a paper that he wrote, that he published. So please have a look at that. That's earlier on in the chat. There's a link there. So Rhiannon, yeah, we'd be happy to help set up or give you access to EarthRanger. So I'll respond to you tomorrow or tonight with an email and we can get you started. Okay, thanks everyone. Rhiannon, Bikash, Aku, great. Okay, we'll be writing to you and sending you some information. And I'm just going to pop up my details here. So if you want to get in contact with me directly, this is the way to do it. And can you see my screen there? Yeah, so that's my email, tonyl@earthranger.com. And you can also scan the little QR code. And when we set you up with EarthRanger, we'll write to you and we'll get you to fill in the form. And then Elian and I will get on a call with you, or our colleague Aki will join us and we'll walk you through all the different solutions, and we'll come up with a way of configuring the platform to help you to build the information products that you're interested and address the particular question that's relevant to you. So every project is different. Every project has a different customization, and we're here to create the conservation solution for you from scratch. Or if you already have some information flows and you'd like to integrate them into EarthRanger, we can also do that too. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thanks very much. And I'll just hand back to Flavia to close up for the session.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tony, Katie, and Koustubh for sharing your insights today. It was wonderful to hear about your case studies and the uses of EarthRanger